Blessed be everyone. Hello and welcome to another episode of Black Magic Talk. We are back, baby. I'm sorry, guys, but I needed a little hiatus, a little time to rest. It was Labor Day, so we were trying to rest and recuperate. I actually said the word right. Wow. We have the lovely Cassandra Paulke with us today, and we're going to learn all about her and what makes her tick and what made her get on her journey or on her path. So thank you so much, Cassandra. Hello and welcome.
Thank you for having me, guys. This is my favorite topic. As I said, I'm a Leo. I love talking about me. So this is just perfect.
So let's not hesitate. Let's go right into it. Tell us about yourself and how you got on your path, and take as long as you need.
Beautiful. Yeah. How much time do you get? So
An
my
hour.
name, let's go. So my name's Cassandra Paulke. I am in Australia, currently in South Australia. This was where I was born, and then moved up to Queensland on the east coast of Australia for 17 years. And then just through life events, ended up moving back down. So it's such a beautiful place here. And I feel like a lot of the time people say this is a place that's a little bit backwards. It is very Christian here as well. Like it's got a Lutheran influence. And so that tradition kind of seeps out into the rest of the culture here. Whereas on the East Coast where I was, it was very like spiritual, woo-woo, witchy, all of that. So it was an interesting time to integrate and to embody everything that I kind of learnt on the East Coast back down in South Australia, where you're getting a lot of the conflict and people kind of looking at you a little bit funny for doing what you're doing. But your vibe attracts your tribe, and I ended up finding a really beautiful community here. And I find where I'm currently at in my journey is like it's so simple, and like there's so much meaning within the cliches as well. Like cliches are there for a reason and they hold so much power as it is, but is to just simply be. And for me, that's been a really beautiful, magical and spiritual journey, is just simply being within this world, like with my physical form, being very present with friendships and connections and family and being with the land. It kind of gave me a bit of a perspective shift around what it was that I was actually doing with paganism and with my belief systems and everything. And it was like, wow, this is what I feel like our ancestors were doing. And then we've kind of put bells and whistles and glitter and crystals into the mix of it as well. But just simply being with nature, I was on 90 acres, which was beautiful for a year at my family's property. And so being with nature, being with the sound of the wind through the trees and everything like that, I was like, oh, I understand the gods now, I think is where I really felt, because I was in the city. So you're trying to find meaning amongst everything. And so that's where, so my degrees are in history. I did both ancient and modern history at university and went and did honors. And I did it around the popularization of astrology within medical science and medical history. So traced how, because like back in the day, you had to learn astrology if you wanted to become anyone and wanted to do anything. If you wanted to be a surgeon, if you wanted to be a lawyer, if you wanted to be a blacksmith, you had to learn astrology. Maybe not a blacksmith, I think they just knew it. But to go to university, you had to learn the craft of it and the scientia. And then in the 1600s, there was a shift when active science came into the mix. So kind of how we think of science now, like biology, chemistry, all of that. And we have to know like the empirical facts of everything, and any room for mystery, which is kind of the basis of science. You have to have a theory. Anyways, was like, no, that's woo-woo. But it's just completely discredited. And so I was like, well, what was happening? And so it was a very messy thesis, but I was just having a lot of fun with it, because I was learning all of this stuff that I was like, how have we not been taught any of this? I thought I was an absolute freak for like learning astrology and wanting to delve into this art form and trying to kind of combine and join the left and right, the feminine, masculine, all of that. But then through my research, that's how it used to be. And then there was a huge split. And so what was natural for me of trying to find the both within the oneness was actually valid. And yeah, so like learning all of that. So during the industrial era, that was when we can see a huge peak in spiritualism, and that's where like a lot of the occult societies really started rearing their heads and really coming through quite strongly during the 1800s. And that was quite recent as well with us with world events where we are feeling more disconnected from nature. And so then we're trying to find reasoning within everything. And then you get a rise within spiritualism and New Age and mysticism and occult and Wicca and witchcraft and all of these different frameworks. There's a huge spike at the moment because people are wanting to get that connection again, because we have just been on this grind of a guinea pig wheel, you know, just like working day in, day out and not having much soulful meaning. And so that's what I've found really interesting with learning history as well, is you can see all the patterns taking place, and it just has made me feel more connected to the world around us, because you can see, I see anyway, the meanings within things, because it's like it's happened before, it's happening now, and it's going to continue happening. So how can I process this? And then also being able to lean on the wisdom of the past. So even like with tarot, so I'll get into more of like this thing led to this, to this, to this. But learning the tarot as well and the history of it, which there isn't much, but there is at the same time, which I can delve into. But we've given things meaning, but then by giving it meaning, we then create the meaning, and then we find the meaning. It's a paradox in my head. But it's like, you know, we can say, okay, this little cord attachment, I'm going to say whenever I find it, or if I put it in a goodie bag and I throw it, it's going to have this meaning. And then also this scrunchie is going to have another meaning. And so then when I put my hand in the box and then throw it, I'm fortune telling. Like I'm doing the craft. So we've given things meaning, but that also doesn't discredit the things. So I do tarot, I do astrology. I'm very passionate about history and trying to ground the spiritualism into the physical as well, because I find it's a huge dishonor to the lineages beforehand and to our ancestors and people that have put in so much hard work into not only forming particular tools, but also the hardships that they've gone through in order to either maintain it or to live their truth. So I find by learning the history of particular crafts, and I say like the real history, but just actually tracing records and everything, instead of just hearing what someone's channeled and downloaded about a particular event without being backed up by anything, I find you don't really have to manipulate a lot of history, because it's pretty cool in and of itself. You don't have to add anything to it. It is juicy, it is scandalous, it is sensational. So by doing that, for me, it's just my way of maintaining integrity to everything that I'm doing, is just by having their living memory within us. But also with that as well, I find currently we're in this stage of, I guess, like holding a lot of the past to our current reality, meaning we're not allowing ourselves the freedom to create things for ourselves in a way. It's like we've put the people of the past on a pedestal, but at the same time, they were human, and they've created a lot of these ideas by themselves. Um, as you know, they're no better than us, and we're no better than them. We're just human. We're trying to make meaning. And so with these people of the past, like I've got so much philosophy books behind me, but like Marcus Aurelius, incredible, love him, like love his thoughts, but also it was just him having thoughts as we have thoughts. But then we've known his books and we've read his books or have seen passages. And for me, I've had these thoughts, and then I go read meditations, and I'm like, oh, it's so comforting that someone of the past so far back has also had a similar thought to me. And that kind of just molds it all into one. So I guess that kind of gives a little insight into how I think. But in terms of the practicality of my life, so I was very fortunate to have grown up in quite a liberal family. Like I was brought up Lutheran, but very, very loosely. But those Christian ideals have definitely been embedded in me. And it's been an interesting process with deconstructing New Age ideologies and seeing the crossover with Christianity, and how no matter how much I tried to move away from it, and rebel against it and everything like that, it comes back in so many different ways. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many more layers to deconstruct with this. And but with that, like we were on 4 acres in the country. It was beautiful. I was talking to spirits at a young age, but more so ancestors. But I think that was just because I had ancestors that had passed over, and hearing stories about them and wanting to connect with them in some way. So I remember going out to the front of the property by this. We used to have a well out the front of the property, and if you guys, there's a type of rock called slate. It's quite a strong rock, and that's where I used to live in Mintera, was Mintera slate. And so I used to write on this piece of slate with a rock, like a letter to my grandma that I'd never met, but apparently we were quite similar and would have had similar interests. And I'd write like a little letter thinking that she would be able to see that or receive it. And then there was a ghost in the house, and I felt the presence, but I thought it was just a 5-year-old being, hyper aware of things, of just like, I'm scared because it's dark. But no, it turned out that there was an actual ghost in the property that thankfully Mum and Dad told me about after we'd moved. So thanks. And then, making little potions out of flowers that you pick and, making perfumes from them. And so it's very connected to nature. For the astrology nerds out there, both my parents are Capricorns, born on the same day, a year apart, which is interesting. My mom's a Taurus rising, and then I'm a Scorpio rising, Libra moon. So very connected to the etheric realms, whereas my parents are very like tangible in this realm, like very much like earthy. This is the practicality of things, which kind of was a little bit abrasive to my flamboyant Leo side that just wanted to express and be creative and be an actress and do this and do that. But it has helped ground me in a lot of ways because I've got no other earth in my chart apart from my north node. And then moving up into the city. So I'm going from pristine countryside into like just the city and all the pollution and all the chemicals that are around you was a bit of a shock to the system. And then there's a bit of a void in my life in terms of like thinking back to it. But I think that goes into just like going on that mundane thing of like wake up, go to school, come home, do homework, go to bed sort of thing. And then it was in year, I would say 7, so I was 12, that I began to be curious about Wicca. That came into my world. I'm not too sure how. I was just looking at things, to be honest, just Google, and then things just start coming up. I wasn't on social media, but social media was starting to pick up its pace a little bit. So that was back in 2010 or 2009, around that time. So Facebook was kind of just starting in a way. MySpace was still the hit social media platform. And then from there, I started learning astrology, and just bit by bit, it was learning the zodiacs. And because I don't really have any cool party tricks, but I thought this would be a cool party trick, was to be able to learn all of the zodiacs and all of the symbols and to be able to like recite them. I'm a hoot at parties. And then in 2016 was what I would kind of regard as like a spiritual awakening. But why I do the parentheses around that is because like that, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, my whole world has been turned up on its head. Where am I in the world? Who am I? What is this flesh? Like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Because I had those incremental shifts over my life. And because at school I did history as well, and I was so fascinated with it, especially ancient history because of the gods. And then going into university as well, doing history, I've had those realizations of our mortality and of human nature and of the spiritualism as well. So I was very fortunate with that, and having, as I said, a liberal family, especially with my mum, just being very curious, and she nurtured a lot of my curiosity as well. So very grateful for that. But 2016 was a pivotal shift because that's when I started to delve into the tarot and delve more into astrology, so natal charts. And I was like, how can this algorithm expose me like this? Like, how can me just like punching in my details completely obliterate me and tell me things that I didn't even know about myself? But I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, how? And then that's how I realized that you know, I'm not just a Leo, because obviously when, like, a lot of people as well share that when they don't resonate with their sign and all of that, it's like because we're an accumulation of all of them, but how those aspects of us and how those archetypes play out will be different for everyone, because they might be more dominant in fire energy or in earth energy, but that doesn't mean that those that are dominant in earth energy don't have fire energy. And then it's a whole like mixture of trying. It's kind of like the humors back in the Middle Ages, where it was like the composition of the body. So there are the four humors. Oh gosh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll try to recite them. Sanguine, melancholic, phlegmatic, and have I said sanguine? I'm pretty sure I said sanguine. Oh, I can never remember. There's another one. Anyways, they were like hot, dry, cold, wet, all of that. Kind of like in Ayurvedic medicine as well. Very like similar concepts, but then, you know, someone could be phlegmatic and sanguine, and then that would mean something. And then melancholic and another one, then that will mean something else, and they'll have a different composition within their body. And so it will just play out differently. Like it's steam, or it would be boiling, or like those sort of energies, muddy, I don't know, lava. And that was really interesting for me. And then going into more occult ideologies and mysticism, and being more curious about that. I did work at a really cool store called Tree of Life, which was like a hippie clothing store, but a lot of the people that came in were of the craft and alternate thinkers. And so I gain a lot of knowledge through talking with people, and because I'm curious and I want to know what makes people tick and why they believe the things that they do. And so that's been one of my key strengths that I'm grateful to have as well, because it just gives another element of understanding as well, because by understanding yourself, you understand others, and by understanding others, you can understand yourself. And then from there, I had a really cool experience of my abilities, you could say. So I started to hear Freya, and I knew of her, like who doesn't? And it's a pretty cool name in and of itself. But it would be constantly. It was like at least 2 to 3 times a day for 2 weeks straight. And I was like, oh, maybe this is just like a nice name to call a future daughter. And then I was like, oh, I just really love it. And then this lady came in and we were talking about that exact thing of like, I just keep hearing this name, Freya. And she passed on an audio file to me, which was of a shamanic drum journey. And so I did that at home. And that was my first time going into like a trance. And like, I'm a logical person, but there's aspects of it that I was like, logic can't explain this really, of figures and names coming in that I was like, what is that? Where like sound. So I think like Matt, you may appreciate this one. So I had this name come through so strongly, and it was Vjor. And I was like, Vjor. I was like, what is that? I had only known of like Freya, Odin, Loki, right? They're just like the basic gods that we kind of know. Like, what is that? And so I was frantically researching afterwards. And she is quite a minor figure within Norse mythology. Pretty sure she was part giantess or was a part of that realm. And she was, the name means wisdom or truth keeper. And people would channel her in order to receive wisdom of the journey ahead. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And then there was Magna Mater came through, and I was like, Magna Carta? Surely that's what it is. But no, Magna Mater is a proper figure. She's like the OG. She's the top dog. She's the matriarch. And then, so you get Magna Mater, and then her associate of like Rhea, and then also like Freya as well. And these like the archetype of divine feminine within different cultures. And then Freya came through as well, but she was kind of like, it transformed into like a Valhalla type of setting where there were a lot of like vine on the ceiling, like tree roots, and then a long table. And she was just like there sitting on someone's lap and with a chalice in her hand, and kind of like raised it to me as kind of like I'm here, or like I'm watching. Like it's not the time yet, but I'm here. And then everything happened with the world in 2019, 2020. And then that was a huge catalyst to then really hone in my skills, because I had the time to. And that's when I delved more into tarot. So I was reading tarot by book, where, as in, like, I'd shuffle a card and then I would read the meaning. But then I really delved into it more. And then I started doing visions of Cassandra, which ties in my love for everything. And yeah, I was able to start getting clients in and getting the validation as well that I am able to do this and I do have the ability to do so, and to tap into these mystical aspects and the subtleties and the subtle bodies as well. And I think everyone does. We just need to be taught how to tune everything out and to tune in. And then I moved up to the sunny coast and had met Daniel, who you had on last week. And then we started relating, and he showed me a whole new world in relation to the occult and the occult sciences and mysteries and ceremonial magic and demonology and all of that. And then that kickstarted a lot, like, of more understanding about things and the esoteric. And then, yeah, it's just kind of catalyzed into where I am now and what I'm offering, which is basically anything and everything.
Well, I just want to go back a little bit. You had
Yeah.
said that you had learned astrology and the sciences behind it. That fascinates me. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I just want to say really quickly, I am a Taurus through and through because I'm very stubborn when it comes to certain things. Okay, I admit it. I admit it. I am bullheaded. Okay, yes, I am bullheaded. My man is an Aries, and he only played in Aries. Like, he's not really an Aries. He's more of a, I would say he's more like me. Like, he might have been like a Taurus rising or whatever, but he definitely played in Aries. But boy, does he set my soul on fire! I'll tell you what. Whoo, boy, a lot of heat there. A lot of heat there.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's
they're
good,
wildfire.
right? That's good for a relationship. You
Yeah.
want that heat. But yeah, tell me about the sciences of astrology, because that just literally fascinates me.
Yeah, so if you can, this is how I kind of start off explaining it to everyone, and also into, like, when I tried to explain it to university people, which are very, clean cut white men in the tower sort of way of thinking, and where it's just like woo woo anything. And so I was like, okay, if you can cast your mind back to, which I know might be hard for some, but if you can cast your mind back to when you've got house, no house, maybe no clothing, who knows, and you're out in the bush, out by the lake, you're a primitive person, and you start noticing patterns within the moon's shape and the positioning of the moon, and then also then the effect that when these big orbs in the sky are a particular shape and size and position, either people start acting a particular way, but also what the water's doing. And that's the main thing that we kind of trace it back to, and a lot of people kind of give reasoning to. It's like, how can you deny astrology when the moon has a direct impact on the tides? And at hospitals, they have to hire more staff on at times of full moons. The idea of a lunatic coming from people that get into a heightened state of being during the full moon, and all of these ideas, that's like, you can't deny its effect. How it is affected or how it affects us, honestly, who knows? But it does. And so we should, just play around with that a little bit. And then I guess with those aspects, like, people started realizing it more. And then especially with women as well, when with our cycles, being able to trade, like, that's one of the earliest forms of a calendar, is what we've been able to hypothesize as well. Because it was like, why are they tracking 28 days? And women are like, let me let you in on a little secret here. And like, just tracking our cycles of, and I guess back then, when you aren't affected much by fluorescent lighting, and our circadian rhythms, are a little bit messed up at the moment, but when they're in flow, you can trace it from moon cycles. So people having their cycles on full moons or on new moons as well, then that can also suggest something else. But that's a whole other kettle of fish that we might not go into right now. But Then in Mesopotamia is where we have been able to track the earliest forms of what we know as like the science of astrology. So actually sitting down and tracking the constellations and the stars and the positionings, and then starting to hypothesize kind of like how, so Carl Jung in the 30s coined the term synchronicity. And so what that entails is this idea of, okay, you can have a look at patterns where it's process of looking backwards instead of looking as is and forward. It's the process of looking as is and back. So, okay, there's these people that are born around this time of the year, and they all seem to have these particular traits, which are very different to when people are born later on in the year who showcase more so these traits. So putting two and two together, there must be something here, and the synchronicities of those things taking place. And so I feel like back in Mesopotamia and Babylon, they were doing a similar thing. And then, you know, the Greeks started getting that information in the Indus Valley. So in India, they started getting the information as well. Just all of these things started spreading through trade, through wars, through just messaging, and or like not messaging, but like going to places and talking with people. And they like culture back then was quite different in a way to as it is now, whereas now it's very gate kept and like, no, this is just my information. Back there it was a little bit more fluid, and they were sharing a lot of this information, like, oh, let me get insight into how you guys think. Oh, that's really interesting that you think that. We have a similar thought, but we call it this, or this is how we do it. And then they're like, oh, that makes sense. Cool. How can we combine these two ideologies? And a great example of that is with like Hermeticism, and then during Alexandria. So when Alexander the Great who was Greek, went to Egypt, brought a lot of those philosophies and traditions there. Then we get philosophers, so Aristotle, Hippocrates, Galen, like all of these philosophers and medical practitioners, in their books, they've got astrology because it's a part of their day-to-day life and it's a part of their culture. And so they are infusing it into everything, and they can see direct relations to something happening and the stars, moon, planets being in a particular position. How they actually, I get baffled with it, like how they actually started viewing, like how they knew what Saturn was, and maybe not. Oh no, they knew what Saturn was. The later, so Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were later discoveries, but the ones that are a little bit more visible to the eye, they were able to track. I just find that fascinating, but I feel like they were not the peak of evolution and human evolution. I feel like back then was something else entirely. And then during the Middle Ages, so there's like a bit of a gap of like history of nothing, and that's the Dark Ages, is like not much progression happening in terms of thoughts and philosophies and spiritualism. But then the Middle Ages and Renaissance start to occur, and then there's a huge revival because they're getting access to a lot of the ancient Greek and Roman texts, and they're like, oh wow, these people that we place on pedestals think this way, this is so cool, let's start tying this into our everyday life and make meaning from them, and incorporate it, and these legislations around it as well. The monarchs were using astrology, like John Dee, he, like the court physician and magician to Elizabeth I, set her coronation date based on astrology and based everything else around like particular astrological dates. And there was which I love talking about because it's so whack. Because it kind of like goes into this meme of like, you can't just blame a crash on, oh, I'm just a girl, the moon was in Aquarius, my bad. It was just the effects of Uranus. But back in the 1400s, there was a court case of medical malpractice against a surgeon who there was a surgery taking place of a thumb, and then something happened, there was an infection, and just it was seen as negligence. It got overruled in court because at the time of surgery, the moon was in malicious Aquarius, and then a few days later, it was in Gemini, which rules the hands. So it's the stars. It's the stars' fault. It's not the surgeon's. But I would say it was the surgeon's fault because he should have had a look at the almanacs to see what the stars were actually doing. But I just thought that was cool because that wouldn't get by in this day and age. And then a lot of the different conflict, or like what was contesting the information during that time, was because Heliocentrism started to come into the mainstream of thought with Copernicus. And so that means the sun is the center of the universe, because during that time they believed that the earth was the center of the universe, which makes sense because you're seeing everything revolve around you. And so you're like, oh, well, theory says this. Copernicus wasn't the first person to suggest that the sun was in the center of the universe. I can't remember his name, but there was someone back in ancient Rome or Greece that believed that, and he had a whole hypothesis for it, but it wasn't agreed upon by a lot of the other people of the time. And then you start getting inventions of more like telescopes and other astronomers coming into the mix to prove particular theories. Like we get Copernicus, we get Kepler, and then later on Galileo. So a lot of these like big figures are coming in to just make more sense of Copernicus. Okay, he's coming through very strongly. He wants to be known. How Copernican of him. But they wanted to prove this idea of heliocentrism more so. And then it's just watching the evolution of it. So they believed that astronomy and astrology back in the day, they didn't have a differentiation really. Their terms were used kind of as synonyms. But then there was a bit of a split, and then they were like, astronomy is the science of astronomy, of tracking the stars, and then astrology is applied astronomy, which I like that idea, because it's like you're tracking, then you're having the science, you're tracking all the stars and everything, and then how that then affects us down here is astrology. And that, as above, so below, as within, so without. That's like Aristotle, he was a huge one of believing that. And I've got lots of different star charts. How convenient when I prepared earlier. Like a lot of these sort of charts, for those that are watching on YouTube and on Rumble, they can see that like these images, and like they're so detailed, a lot of these. There you go. There's one there. Images are so detailed, so they can see that in the middle there is possibly us, and then around there is the zodiac belt, and which is kind of rotating around us, and then that will have a direct effect on us. Aristotle believed that let's find another little picture that can I found one, but it was like quite small. Oh, this one can be good. Okay. So in the middle here, you can see that that would be us, and how that's colored there. Aristotle believed that that was an accumulation of all the different elements. And that then in turn had, so it was called sublunar, so below the lunar sort of belt. Anything that the moon was doing around these circles. Oh, it's really hard with this camera view. There we go. So the circles around, like the orbits. So that first little one that is there could be our moon. And so when that's moving, that's then stirring up all of the different elements within here that will then affect our seasons and our temperaments as well. And then all of these other realms and different circles and spheres are the different other planets, and that will have their own harmonic and their own tune. There's an idea of the music of the spheres as well, where each rotation had a particular frequency and rhythm. And as we know, frequency is kind of everything. And we are all frequency and all vibrations. And so those different tunes, as the hypothesis said, was when you hear trumpets, it makes you feel a particular way, as opposed to when you hear a fiddle being played. Fiddle being played kind of makes you want to dance. And then you hear drums and you're like, okay, it's wartime now. And then when you hear trumpets, you feel a little bit more like, I don't know, in your chest, a little bit more victorious. That could be association with, like within movies and everything. But that idea of different music will make you feel a particular way. And we can't hear the stars, we can't hear the frequencies, but they're having an effect on us. And who thought of that? It was no other than Pythagoras. So he was believed to have actually been able to hear the frequencies, which I think is cool. I wouldn't put it past him, to be honest, without all the distractions of the noise. Like there's a plane going overhead now, and everything. You could be more attuned to the subtle frequencies. And so he was the one that really promoted that idea of music of the spheres, which ties back into, again, that idea of how these elements affect us or have an effect on us. And I know myself. So yesterday I was doing a bit of content and feeling moody in a good way, but I was feeling like a little bit more occulty. And some of the photos that I took, I'm like, that's very scorpionic. And then I looked at what the moon was doing. The moon was in Scorpio. I was like, perfect. Because as well, the music I was choosing for it was, Moonlight Sonata and Phantom of the Opera and just very like Scorpio. And then that's happened quite frequently where I am not tracking what the stars are doing at particular times. I'm just going with it. And then I'm like, this is, now that I know it, it's like I've learned the tools, I've embedded the tools into my system. And now I'm responding with that now. I don't have to actively look at the things. I feel it. I'm like, I can feel a subtle drop in energy right now. Or I can feel an invigorating energy, or like, why is this happening? And I'm like, it feels like that the moon or something's doing this. And then I look at my little star chart on my phone and I'm like, perfect. It is confirmation bias at its peak. It's fantastic. And that's similarly as well with the tarot. And so I've got a tarot course coming out with Daniel Kulkartametsa, Journeying with the Tarot. And what I'm trying to teach within that is more so how to tap into our spiritual body and our subtle body. Because as I said at the beginning, we've given things meaning. And with tarot, we've given these pieces of cards meaning. Like it started out, like with the history, it was playing cards. They were gambling cards. And the imagery on it was reflective of the time. So there was deities on particular ones. They were reflective of particular plays that were taking place. And then during the 1600s and then especially 1800s was when they were like, no, these have occult deep meanings. These are hermetic teachings from Thoth himself without any proof, because these ideas started coming through before the Rosetta Stone was deciphered. And they're obviously seeing these hieroglyphs. We're like, what does it mean? Maybe this holds the key to all of our history and all of this unknown. Maybe they hold the answer that I still feel a lot of people are holding Egypt to. And then they've given them more occult meanings, which also isn't a negative thing. It's just we're able to interpret these cards in a different way now. And we just have a different tool of accessing our subconscious more. And that's what someone said to me actually when I worked in that hippie store. She was like, you don't need tarot. You don't need them. You can do it yourself. Like if you think about, like you can hold a card. She was like, I'll give you a practice. You get your cards, you shuffle it, and you hold it, and you feel into it and feel into the energy before you even look at the picture. And then you turn it around, and more often than not, it will be what you had interpreted. And so I feel like what she was getting at with that is these are giving us an access point to our own spiritual body and our own spirituality. But we have, over time, we've forgotten these tools and we've forgotten these practices in order to really tap into this etheric body. And so these are energies that we can utilize in order to go further into that, to then gain better understandings of the world around us. And so that's what we're wanting to implement within the course, is to be able to tap into this energy and to embody these cards and to embody these archetypes, because they are universal symbols, they're universal archetypes. There's a lot of psychology and philosophy involved, especially within the Rider-Waite deck, because like Pamela Coleman Smith, like her artistry in it is beautiful and had access to a lot of wisdom from the Golden Dawn, as well as she had access to like the British Museum and British Library. I think it was British Library, which held a lot of these old tarot card decks. And so she was able to kind of piece together a lot of these different symbols from across time and space for us to, it's like a little key. It's giving us the key to unlock. And I feel like once you've been able to implement that tool within your body, as I'm sure you both know as well with learning the tarot, like they become a part of you. And by shuffling them and reading them, you already know what it is. Like you just see it, you're like, that's that. Like they've got all different energies. Like I've got this, I don't know if you guys have had this deck, the Ethereal Visions. Oh, she is pretty with a vengeance. She is so cutthroat, but she's pretty as all else. It is like very Art Deco sort of cards, and like this temperance. Like, look how beautiful that is. It's like the gold foil, and it's just sensational. As opposed to, I got the Visconti Sforza reproduction deck as well. Like this one I haven't really been able to connect with. I haven't worked with it much, but that and the Masai deck, I've just like it hasn't really been embedded within me yet. And then I've got my little pocket tarot, which is just one. I'm not going to show you the case because it's very decrepit. But it's so tiny, and I just have that in my bag because a lot of the time if I go out for coffees with friends, I end up giving them a tarot reading. But yeah, do you have any questions in regards to the clarity with the science of astrology?
No, actually, if we could just move on a little bit. You had said that when you were younger, you had heard the name Freya.
Mm.
And I think that's so funny because, like a year ago, maybe about 6 months, I had a dream about Hecate. Like I actually saw Hecate with my eyes in the dream, and like she was like my mother walking me to school. And she would lay in the grass and be like, I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I haven't been alive or a human for so long, and I miss this. It's almost like she was kind of like taking in the scene because she doesn't get to do a lot of that. That's what
Mm.
I gathered from the dream. So, were you scared when you heard these voices, or can you talk a little bit about these? Like, were you scared when you heard these voices? Did you think you were crazy when you heard these voices? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. No, because so for me, it was thoughts. Like, it was kind of like claircognitive, where it was just like, when I say like kept hearing the name, it was like I would hear a mum call out to her daughter, and her daughter's name was Freya, or was in songs or in movies or things like that. To clarify, with when I was hearing it, it was just like I was actually in the physical realms hearing Freya, and I was just like, oh my goodness. I was like, is it because, that idea of I really want a red Ford, whatever, Ford Ranger, and then you keep seeing red Ford Rangers around the place, like if it's that sort of idea. But then it disappeared as soon as I did that shamanic drum journey. Not completely disappeared, but decreased in frequency. I was just really curious, more so. I was like, why? Like, what's going on here? This is cool. And because I still get giddy with the spiritual experiences. I don't do well with ghosts and that sort of energy. Even though I want to start channeling spirits, I am a scared little girl when it comes to it. But I was curious and I was excited. And then once I went into that drum journey, it was grounding. And then we did, like Daniel and I, with a couple of friends, did a ritual, and we frequently did a few rituals for Freya. And they were the most beautiful rituals. Like they were powerful and healing and just yummy. Like it just felt so solid in my being when working with her energy. And yeah, it was a great time. But yeah, no, I definitely wasn't scared. So that was good. And I didn't think I was crazy. I'm trying, so with my business name, Visions of Cassandra, so the story of Cassandra within mythology, she was in the Trojan Wars, and she was a priestess of Apollo, possibly one of the priestesses of Delphi, or wanted to have that elevated status. She was then gifted the sight of prophecy, or gifted the gift of sight and prophecy, because Apollo was trying to woo her, and he was a bit of her favorite, and was like, yeah, I'll give you this gift of prophecy. And she was like, sick. Got the gift. And then he was like, if you get with me. And she was like, that's not what I'm about, dude. And so then he cursed her with the gift of sight, with the curse of no one will believe her. So then when the Trojan War was like really taking place with the horse, she was going around trying to like say like can't you, like, I'm telling you, I'm trying to save you, I'm trying to help you, that this is taking place and this is going to happen. And people thought that she was crazy. And then she ended up having some not so nice things happen to her within the temple of Athena. And then Athena then kind of was like, you don't touch one of my girlies, homie. And so then basically got rid of the Greeks. So that for me then resonates into very much around the persecution wound and around mysticism and the magic arts in and of itself, where a lot of us are led to believe that we're crazy for knowing intuitively about things. And especially as women, where it's like, I know I'm right about this. And a lot of the time we get conflicted with, no, you're just crazy. You're thinking too much into it. You don't know this person like I do, yada, yada, yada. And then time tells that you were correct. So it was as an ode, like it came through so strongly, that name. I was like, maybe it sounds a little bit cheesy and like, ugh, but for me, it holds so true. Like visions of Cassandra, like you have these visions, you have these ideas. I've got a heretic archetype as well within human design. So it's leaning more into that idea. And especially when you know deep down this truth within yourself and the wisdoms that come from it as well, and you're sharing it. And it helps other people to feel into that energies for themselves and kind of gives them a safe space to explore it. Because I don't hold any judgment for people exploring these arts, like each to their own. The only judgment I have is when it goes into absolutist thinking of this is the truth. I'm like, it's a truth. It's your truth. It's something that works with you. It's not the ultimate truth. So yeah, that's where Visions of Cassandra was birthed. And I like telling people that story because her name and story has kind of been forgotten within a lot of the mythical realms. She's not often mentioned, only on occasion. ABBA did a song on her. So that's my claim to fame is ABBA.
Would you be interested in doing maybe a little tarot reading with us right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. What would you like insight on?
Matt, do you want to ask a question or do you want me to ask the question?
No, go for it. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. How do I frame this question? In 3 months, what's going to happen with me and my man? There.
Excellent. So I'll give you insight. So what I tell people straight up on readings is I don't speak into the physical of, say, as example of, you'll have this house, or you will have, as example, you're going to get married with 3 kids, you're going to live in this state, they're going to look like this, that, etc. I read the energy levels of like, this is the energy that, might be needing to consider or might come up around that time. And then this is how to possibly approach it. So that's how I do it, because then that leaves room for how that then manifests within the physical form. But the energies will possibly, more than likely, kind of remain the same. Also, I do all my readings online.
Because I mean, the energies around us will manifest, as you said, into the physical. I don't know how to explain it. You explained it so beautifully. I don't know how to explain it. But eventually it will come into the physical. Yeah. Is what I'm trying to say.
If you have the belief that we are operating on multiple timelines as well, very Doctor Strange-like, then if you do something and you timeline shift, then what was, say, like right now in the current timeline that you're in, what would possibly manifest physically might be different from in 3 days when you might go through a huge timeline shift. It will manifest differently. Yeah. So that's what I like to kind of explain to people, because I feed my own Delulu, but I don't like feeding Delulu. Alrighty. Yeah, I do all my readings like online, like pre-recorded, and people are like, how? But how? Like, how do you do that? Do you not need a photo of me? Do you not need like me right there? And I'm like, no, man, we're working with the void.
We're working with the energy that is you. I mean, just from, I've been very, I've been working on my site. I know Sonia Matt has been working with me and is planning on doing a medium course with me. Thank you so much for letting me meet her, because Sonia is just out of this world awesome. And then she's also been working with me and sort of this, but yeah, Cassie, whatever you can find.
So I love how I did a reading yesterday, and it was basically like all major arcana, which was fantastic. I was like, that like rarely happens, where like I think I've posted on Instagram, or about to, like it was every single card was a major arcana. And I was like, girl, I'm shuffling these. A few within yours. So in the next 3 months or within the next little while, it seems really beautiful. At the same time, naturally, there's challenges. Why I say
Mm-hmm.
that, so you've got the world, 9 of cups, the tower, 2 of cups, which I was like, yummy. A block and challenge is the magician, and action to take is Knight of Swords. So with these first few energies, it's like the world, where I'll just do like oh my gosh, a simplified reading, and like generic in the sense of explaining the cards, just for those that are listening that are like interested in the meanings and everything. So we have the world, which is the last of the major arcana, so it's the completion. So you have this idea of the fool's journey, starting with the fool, going to the world, and how you can remember the cards is by learning the fool's journey and understanding the ebbs and flows and the trials and tribulations along the way. So with the world, it's like there's this idea of completion. You have finished a cycle and going into a new one. With that, though, with closing of cycles, it's that in that pause, right, between the inhale and exhale, between the point of the Ouroboros where the tail starts to connect with its mouth again, where you have that moment in between what was and what is, that you can really utilize to feel into and to think around about what it is that you are wanting to move into. What is this next cycle and this next fool's journey that you're wanting to cultivate more of? What are the energies that you want to bring in, as opposed to like, I want a 401k, or I'm wanting this, a 5k month, or whatever it is. It's like, I want to feel fulfilled. I want to feel nourished. I want to feel adored. I want to feel this. And then with that, you can then start to feel into the moments and times where you're not feeling that way, or being made to feel like that's not how you're feeling. So as an example of that is, I want to feel understood. I want to feel like my needs are being taken into consideration, etc. So then when those times don't feel like that, you're tuned in, like you're locked into it. You're like, oh, my needs aren't being taken into consideration right now. And that's been a huge value of mine and what I'm wanting to cultivate more of within this cycle. So I'm going to speak into that, be like, hey, look, I understand this, but I just need to feel this right now. So in those moments of pause, it can be ever so brief, but it can also be quite a pivotal time for you to feel into what it is that you're wanting to call forward. And with that as well, like with the 9 of cups, it's like, feel good about yourself, feel hopeful and like abundant and prosperous around this next journey, because your wishes are being granted in a way, but it's mindful of what those wishes are, and that they can't just like, not like they can't just happen, but like that idea of like love just doesn't happen. Like love needs work, like love is work. And to be in love and to be in commitment and to be in union requires your part to play in it as well. And like the upkeep of it and the balance and harmony and temperance of it. With it as well, so with the tower, I quite enjoy reading the tower for people, because obviously it's a card that people get very like they don't like, because I'll show people. I mean, this one looks fine, but normally it looks scary. But that idea of old structures falling away, so within that world of like old
That's what
cycles
I was thinking
closing.
too, because my man
Yeah.
does have a lot of money, and I'm kind of like, you have to understand, Cassandra, I am not well off. Sonia is probably watching this going, oh girl, oh girl. So my financial situation could be better, and I'm very afraid that once him and I get married and we want to have more children, of course. Um, once this all happens, I'm afraid that I'm going to become a hypocrite because now I have money. But like, I'm trying to remember that I was at this point and I can still help people who are less fortunate. So I'm trying to. And the other thing is, I never had a man pamper me. He wants to pamper me. He wants to
Oh,
spoil me. Okay,
yummy.
yes. But I've always worked hard for what I've done in my life.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that he wants to spoil me with all this stuff, but it's kind of hard to get used to a man spoiling me because I've never had that. So it's
Yeah.
so funny you say that. And I don't see the tower as like destruction of the relationship, because I mean, we're very like we're soulmates. All right, I'll just say that we're soulmates.
Yeah, two of cups is, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yes. So I think it's that it's the I have to literally let go of that where I feel like I'm a hypocrite if I have money, because there are still people out there less fortunate than me, but I can still help them. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So I'm kind of like dealing with that at the same
Yeah,
time.
I feel so kind of tying in, which is kind of perfect. So with the tarot, and as we know them now, it does incorporate the four cardinal virtues and the seven virtues within Christianity, which I wrote them down as well, just for because so we got temperance, we've got strength, we've got justice, we've got prudence, faith, hope, and charity. And
Mhm.
so those last ones don't necessarily, like hope does with the star. The other ones don't necessarily come through in its like major arcana form in the Rider Waite deck, but they do within the Charles the Sixth deck. He has prudence, which is kind of cool. So with these, we have those virtues where we can tie in that idea of greed. And so for me at the moment, or has been for the past year, you've looked into, persecution wounds, but I'm looking into how the seven deadly sins have manifested negatively within my life and how they've been restricting me as well. So
Okay.
with greed, right? You might
Yeah.
feel like, I've got all this money now, I'm going to be seen as greedy. So no, you
Mhm.
can use the money, as you said, for good. Those values will stay the same if you keep them the same. It's just you have access to utilize this energy more, because money is energy as well. Very physical, 100%, and we have to work a lot to get it sometimes, but it's an energy form. And so whatever you're fueling that energy towards is ultimately, if it's, instead of buying a Louis Vuitton bag and Gucci every other day, you're putting it towards, these things that are helping people. So
Right.
that in itself is that charity piece, and that temperance, it's having the balance. So it's catching yourself within those moments, even like before you go to purchase something or to pay for something that is quite a big amount, have that self-talk with yourself to help soothe, because those old stories and patterns and conditionings will for sure come up. But it's like, no, I am doing this for the greater good. I am grateful that I have the money in order to help more people. And I love being able to do this, instead of, oh, I feel like a hypocrite doing this. Like, I'm not worthy of this. Like, that difference of approach can be really
Mhm.
beneficial. And yeah, with the tower, it's like how you can allow those old structures to crumble and to fall away. And it's not necessarily a shock to you because you're quite aware of these things happening, but it's how you can then
Mhm.
rebuild the structures to this new cycle. Because it's like with the tower, I like to think of, okay, some restoration needs to happen. This is an old
Mhm.
crumbling piece of brick that the plumbing's gone. There's mold everywhere. Like, we need to allow these things to fall away so we can create a stronger structure, still have its same like foundation, or like the look of it and everything like that, but of stronger material. And then yeah, with the Two of Cups, it's that unity, it's that balance. The challenge with the Magician is, I feel like, as you said, because like for me, the Magician is having control over your mental space and of the world around you and what you're manifesting. And so that block could be around, I want to do this, but I'm feeling restricted by this. So how you can take control of that inner narrative so you can alchemize it to then move forward into this next evolution of yourself, where there is more expansion and more capacity for you to do the things that you truly want to do, because money is such a gift. When you're utilizing it properly, like, it is such a gift to have money, and you can feel more abundant and just sharing a lot, and just being able to help other people who,
Sound like
as you
him.
said,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
exactly what he said. He said, because he's right. I would rather focus on my 3 shows and make them better, bigger, better. I also would like to, my other 2 shows, everyone knows this. The fans out there know this, that I have 2 wrestling podcasts, and then of course this podcast. And he said as much. He's like, I know you want to spend more time with your shows, but then I also have another job where I literally tear computers apart for a living. Um, yeah, but I mean, it pays the bills, whereas the 3 shows don't really pay the bills yet. but he just keeps saying, you know, just keep moving forward, don't look backwards.
Yeah.
So you sound just like him when you say that. I'm just like, oh god, she
Yeah,
sounds just like
it's
him.
validating it. It's validating it for you. And as well, I remember saying that my mum said once, and it was because we are such big givers within like my family, like especially like my mum and I, like we love to give and we love to share. But in order to have that exchange, in order to give, and for you to feel kind of good about giving, you need someone to receive. But we have this story, especially as givers. I just need to charge my laptop. As stories as givers, is that, oh no, I don't like people giving to me. He's providing the opportunity.
Blessed be everyone. Hello. I just want to let everyone know that the outro music is AI generated. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. And also, if you would like to generate your own AI, the link in the description field will be for their website. Blessed be everyone.
In the woods where the whispers run deep, underneath the moon, where secrets we keep, she dances in the shadow with the silver tide. Candles flicker soft, guiding light as a guide. Her altar's filled with herbs and old charms, lost in ancient spells, safe in her arms. Stars weave a tapestry across the black sky. With a chalice raised high, she lets out a sigh. With her sacred circle drawn tight, calling to the spirits in the quiet of the night. Her magic's in the earth, the wind, and the seas. She whispers ancient words, swaying like the trees. In a grove of oaks, where the world stands still, she gathers her strength with every Sabbath thrill. The moon's tender gaze, casting shadows cold, the stories of her craft in the twilight retold. The broom by her doorstep, sweeping away all the dark shadows of yesterday. With the cauldron bubbling, herbs to the air, every spell she casts is a heartfelt